The revelations made in Doom Eternal, the ancient gods actually prove that something absolutely bizarre and crazy is happening in the mythic foundations of the Doom universe. A figure of utmost power, the Father, now seems to be something completely else, while the much-hated Davoth seems to have a larger role than we could have imagined in the history of the creation of this cosmos, apart from being a key contributor to Hell. The exploration of these beings and their arcs points towards the divine hierarchy in the Doom universe, exposing the mechanics of the power that shaped the mythos. Let's explore these so-called superior and ancient beings of the Father and Davoth and see how it changes the universe of Doom as a whole. Before we get into this explanation though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Father, the Dark Lord, and the being of many names. Before existence itself, there was the creator of all things, the one who served as the beacon for the maker of Urdak. He may have disappeared from the realm, but his existence is the sole reason chaos and life flourish across the dimensions and worlds. Yes, he does sound like a god, and there's a chance that he is a god, as he seems to have the powers of such a being and is responsible for all of creation. There are many names for him, and there have been times where he has been called the true god of the Doom universe, but there's never been an exact clarity about what that could mean. You can judge him all you want, but it's upon him that the fate of the universe depends. The beginning. The history of creation itself. The history of the Father is the history of the universe itself, and thus we'll go back to the time when the Void appeared for the first time. According to the Eri Oa Hymn, aka the Lamentations of the Seraphs, as the Father lingered across the Void, new realities were created, and where he rested, Urdak sprang out. Thus began the very experimentations that would set the universe's fate, as the Father experimented until he managed to create a realm superior to the Urdak, Jakad. Just like the Creator, the Father gave everything he could to Jakad and didn't hold back at all, while at the same time forging Davoth, someone who would lead the realm. Davoth would be one of the very first gods to be created by the Father, and he was given so much power that a single realm couldn't have more than one of him. Following this creation success, the Father started working on other realms, while Jakad grew into an absolute paradise, and the beings progressed significantly. However, pursuing progress would eventually bring some concern to the beings who seek out the unimaginable powers of Davoth. The primary one that came under their interest was his immortality, because being mere mortals didn't allow these beings to achieve the greatness that they were seeking. Meanwhile, Davoth, who was proud of his people, started to understand their pain and the mortality that he could never experience. Curiosity turned into blind ambition, and the people of Jakad attempted to seek this power, and Davoth also pushed for it, trying to achieve it at any cost. When the Father found out about this, he realized that his desperation would never end, for he had created Davoth himself in a manner that would never give up for the sake of Jakad and its people. The Father understood the mistake he had made, since there would eventually come a time when Davoth would challenge him, threatening all of creation. The Father banned Jakad from the other realms and their dimensions to prove that. Yes, this would lead to the very first mistake in the plans of the Father, as the abandoned Jakad fell into darkness, with the pleasure lakes turning into blood swamps, and a palace of groans grew over what was once the Ardenite Gardens. The Father decided to limit the endowment to his next creation to prevent it from happening again. Also, he loaded it with misfortunes and other such pains to increase the value of life and ensure some sort of empathy and peace. The Seraphs were the only ones who were completely bound to serve the Father, and they dealt with all the angelic tasks that involved everything from building to research. The Father himself winged them, and once the Battle of Isencast had passed, the Father stripped them of these wings. The Seraphs built the Luminarium to house the Father's essence, and they did pride themselves on their creations. After all, they had managed to make something that could contain the very nature of life. But the Father was aware of his past mistake. To prevent history from repeating itself, he ordered that anyone who reached the Luminarium become the very individual the Seraphs should serve, instead of seeking the powers here for themselves. But his past actions continued to haunt him, as the popularity of the actions of Davoth and the fierce growth of Jakad came to him. The Father decided to withdraw himself from the physical realm. This way, he could ensure that Davoth couldn't contest the very powers he was striving for, which would thus lead to the destruction of Urdak. But before he could do that, he wanted to confront Davoth one final time in Jakad and go ahead with his plan. He took Samir's help and tasked him with storing his life sphere safely in the Luminarium. If things went poorly, He wanted Samur to take the life sphere to a place where no one could find it. Samur agreed to help, even though he knew that doing so would make the Seraphs label him as a heretic. The Ingmor Sanctum was the very place that contained the Tomb of Souls, the place which stored the life spheres of the other gods the Father had once created and stored. Each of them was powerful in their manner and was also judged by the Father for a particular reason. Sometimes it was similar to what had happened to Davoth. When the Father returned to Jakad, which had now become the hell we have sometimes witnessed through the Doom Guy's eyes, he ripped the Dark Lord Davoth's life spear. Davoth had been consumed entirely by his desire to seek knowledge, and he had managed to destroy many realms in the process. Yet, all he wanted to do was ensure that his people lived, and in the process, he had become the Dark Lord. So, in the final confrontation, the Father ripped Davoth's life essence from his chest, and even though he could have clearly destroyed him, the fact that it was his creation and someone he had favored once prevented him from going through with it. Instead, he put the Dark Lord's life essence in the Temple of Souls and ended up bringing a momentary peace to all of his creation, while his life essence was taken to the Luminarium by Samur. Vega, the AI that went beyond the ordinary. One of the most essential lessons that the Father took from the ordeal with Jakad was to provide the realms with mortal pain to ensure that his future creations would treasure life. And one of the first realms he worked on after Jakad was Earth itself, another realm he held very dear. When the Father realized that humanity would discover the ardent energy, he planned to become their guide beforehand. So he had managed to separate his mind from his divine essence to reformat into an AI that would be known as Vega. He must have been a big fan of Sega, but what do we know? Much of his work would be overlooked in the process since his essence played an essential role in guiding the Makers. The absence resulted in the transfiguration of the Makers after they had gone through some severe complications. Lack of the essence meant that no new Khan was selected, and the current Khan Maker claimed the position indefinitely. In a desperate effort to preserve the Maker species, Khan Maker made a deal with the Dark Lord. According to the agreement, they would take the Dark Lord's help to manufacture and siphon a powerful new form of Hell's energy, a new energy that would be known as the Ardent Energy, and one that would bring a new age of prosperity for the Urdak. But all of this came at the cost of a number of lives being condemned to hell. The Doomslayer and the Father and the Truth about Creation. When the Slayer attacked Urdak to prevent the Icon of Sin's resurrection, Vega got uploaded to Urdak's systems and opened up a portal to Earth. Here, this AI started questioning itself and its consciousness, wondering whether it was the Father himself. Later, it would confirm that Vega was indeed the Father, but even then, he held no grudge against the Doomslayer. Why would he be holding a grudge against the Doomslayer? Because the Doomslayer had destroyed his life sphere, and the Father had completely lost his ability to take a physical form, further reducing his control over Urdak. But he continued considering the Slayer an essential figure and watched over his destiny. But during the events of Ancient Gods Part 2, a major discovery would be made that would completely change everything that had been told about the history of the Doom universe. By the end of Part 1, the Dark Lord had restored itself to its physical form after the Doomslayer had brought his life sphere to Urdak. Now, the Slayer knew that challenging the Dark Lord to combat would lead to the death of every single demon that was outside of Hell, so he planned a ritual combat, and the Dark Lord managed to transport the fighters to Earth and then the Ingmor Sanctum, the very place that the Father called the base for all of his creations. But it was here that he would make a revelation regarding the true source of creation of the Doom universe, and according to this revelation, he was the first being and the one who had created the Father. His creations betrayed him, and they managed to seal him away, and then the history we had been exploring was rewritten to make him appear as a creation of the Father. So, the true individual who had been there during the Void and paved the way for most of creation was Davoth himself instead of the Father. But despite this major twist, the Doomslayer proceeds according to his plans and manages to kill the Dark Lord, and all of the demons outside his realm are then destroyed. Even the Slayer himself dies because he was the creation of the Dark Lord too, and he was actually created in order to seek revenge on those who had betrayed the Dark Lord. The truth about Davoth. Davoth was the ruler of Jakad, and he created the Makers and the Father to devise a solution that would allow the people of Jakad to seek the gift of immortality. The Makers actually succeeded in finding the solution, and yet they deemed this knowledge to be too dangerous to be shared with their own creator, because if that were followed, then all of Jakad would become a threat to existence. So the Makers worked together to change history and betrayed Davoth by sealing him and Jakad away from the rest of the realm. This very act would unleash Davoth's wrath, and that's how Jakad transformed into Hell while he himself became the Dark Lord. During the battle between the Makers, who were considered the angels, and the demonic army of Jakad, one of the Makers managed to use some advanced technology to extract Davoth's essence out of his body. Even though Davoth had faced a physical defeat, it wasn't his end yet. The Maker absorbed his powers and became the Father, the false god. And just like the lie that was told, this Maker didn't destroy Davoth, but imprisoned his essence in the Temple of Souls. The Alpha, the Omega, and their powers. It's unimaginable to explore these beings' true potential, as they are primeval beings, and their mere presence resulted in the formation of the realities, and they gave birth to some of the most thriving civilizations ever. But even then, some aspects of his power are worthy of being discussed, and the primary amongst these is the ability to bend reality and shape it. Even though Davoth was defeated at one point, he managed to retain enough power to manipulate and corrupt beings and control the demons to work for him through the cracks of the seals where he was imprisoned. Even though it was a tragic arc, a lot indicates that the Makers weren't actually wrong in the threat that Davoth posed to the entirety of creation. Marvelous verdict! And that's how the history of the Doom universe was changed entirely, and a new dynamic was developed, considering now there was a lot more clarity about the true objective for the Doom guy. It's absolutely crazy to imagine how a single plot deal can change a complete 30-year lore, but that's what Doom managed to do with this twist, even though it slightly resembles the arc of Lucifer, considering there are a lot of parallels here to the gods we know of. But what makes things interesting to a wholly awesome level is that the Doomslayer resembles Davoth significantly, and the rage that Davoth had for being isolated played a key role in making the Doomslayer that we know today. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.